He is one of the few names in history that feels like a force of nature. Julius Caesar. It evokes power, conquest, an inevitable march of legions. But what if that idea of inevitability is the greatest trick he ever played? What if his legendary victories weren't just a product of having the best army, but of a single, ruthless habit of mind? A knack for seeing total victory where every other commander saw only acceptable defeat. A habit that, once you understand it, rewrites everything you thought you knew about Roman power. Today, we're uncovering that secret by counting down his top 5 tactical moves. And the first one on our list isn't a glorious conquest. It's a desperate, bloody fight in a swamp that he was never supposed to win. Before we dive into that first brutal battle, do me a quick favor. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you know. And drop a comment right now with where you're watching from. It's amazing to see this community come together from all over. Now, let's get to the history. So, where does the legend of Caesar the battlefield commander truly begin? Not with a famous phrase, but with a crisis he himself may have engineered. The year is 58 BC. Caesar is the new governor of Gaul, and he's broke, deeply in debt, and needs a military victory to secure his political future. Then, a gift. A massive migration of 370,000 Helvetians, warriors, women, children, are moving west, threatening the Roman province. They ask for safe passage. Every fiber of Roman policy says to refuse, to force a battle. But Caesar does the unthinkable. He agrees. He promises them a route, buying himself precious time. But this is not a sign of weakness. It's the first move in a trap. While the Helvetians celebrate, believing they've outmaneuvered Rome, Caesar is racing. He abandons his own slow-moving supply train, liquefies his personal fortune to pay his legions, and force marches them day and night to intercept the migration at a river crossing. He finds them, but his reinforcements haven't arrived. He is dangerously outnumbered. A conventional general would wait, but Caesar's core principle, the habit of mind we talked about, is velocity. The speed of his decision-making is his ultimate weapon. He attacks immediately. The battle is a chaotic, bloody affair across the river. It isn't a clean cinematic victory. It's a brutal slog. But Caesar's velocity creates chaos. And in that chaos, the Helvetian war machine, built for travel, not for sudden battle, begins to fracture. Their migration grinds to a halt. This is the crucial part. Caesar doesn't destroy them here. He wounds them, harries them, and forces them into a desperate, starving retreat. For days, he shadows them, letting hunger and despair do the work of his swords. The final battle, at Bibracte, is almost a formality. The Helvetians, exhausted and cornered, are shattered. Those who survive are sent back to their homeland as a buffer for Rome. So why is this messy, two-part battle our number 5? Because it contains the DNA of every victory to come. It shows Caesar using diplomacy as a deception, strategic delay as an offensive weapon, and relentless velocity to disrupt a larger complacent enemy. He didn't just win a battle. He manufactured a justification for a war, secured his finances with plunder, and established himself as the dominant force in Gaul. But this was just the opening act. What do you do when your next enemy doesn't march in a slow-moving column, but is a massive, fluid horde of nomadic warriors, born and bred for cavalry combat? How do you beat an enemy that is faster than you? The answer is move number 4, where Caesar doesn't try to outrun his enemy. He outthinks them in one of the most brilliant engineering feats in military history. So, how does a commander, whose greatest strength is the relentless forward momentum of his legions, defeat an enemy that refuses to stand and fight? This was Caesar's nightmare in 57 BC against the Nervii, a confederation of fierce Belgian tribes. But his ultimate test against a truly elusive foe came later, against the Germanic Suebi and their legendary king, Ariovistus. This was a different kind of war. The Suebi were masters of guerrilla tactics. Their cavalry could strike like lightning and vanish into the vast forest. To chase them was to march into an ambush. To wait for them was to starve. Caesar was trapped by the very geography that was supposed to protect him, the mighty Rhine River. It was an impassable, natural barrier that the Germanic tribes used as their personal shield, raiding across it and then retreating to safety. A conventional Roman general would fortify the bank and accept a stalemate. But for Caesar, a stalemate was a defeat. So, he made a decision that stunned both his men and his enemies. He would not wait for the Suebi to come to him. He would not attempt a dangerous river crossing in boats under a hail of javelins. No, he decided to build a bridge. But this was no ordinary bridge. In a display of engineering audacity that defied belief, Caesar's legions constructed a massive, fortified timber bridge across the entire, swollen width of the Rhine River in just 10 days. Think about the sheer psychological impact of that. For the Suebi, the Rhine was a god, an unconquerable moat. For Caesar, it was a minor inconvenience. The bridge was more than a crossing. It was a statement. It was a physical manifestation of Roman will. A message that said, there is nowhere you can hide. The moment his legions marched across that bridge in perfect formation, the strategic landscape shattered. The Suebi, who relied on the river for their defense, abandoned their villages and fled deep into the forests. Caesar had not just outmaneuvered them, he had invalidated their entire way of war. He spent 18 days on the Germanic side of the Rhine, demonstrating his absolute power, before deliberately destroying the bridge behind him as he left. This is move number 4, the tactical masterpiece that isn't a battle at all. It's the application of overwhelming engineering and psychological power to achieve a strategic victory without a major fight. He turned an immovable object into a pathway for his legions. But this victory was clean, almost clinical. What happens when the situation is the exact opposite? What do you do when you are not the hunter, but the prey? When you are catastrophically outnumbered, surrounded, and on the brink of total annihilation? That desperate scenario is where we find move number 3, a defensive masterpiece so brilliant it defies all logic. So, what does a commander do when velocity and engineering are no longer tools of attack, but his only hope for survival? The answer lies in 52 BC, at Alesia. This is Caesar's nightmare scenario. After years of conquest, all of Gaul has suddenly and violently united under the charismatic king Vercingetorix. Caesar's legions are trapped deep in hostile territory, their supply lines cut. In a moment of stunning tactical insight, Vercingetorix doesn't attack the Romans head-on. He retreats to the massive hilltop fortress of Alesia, daring Caesar to follow. He is betting everything that Caesar will be forced to besiege him, and that the sheer size of the Gallic relief army now gathering will crush the Romans between the fortress and the hammer. Caesar is surrounded, outnumbered by at least 5-1, and starving. Any other general would cut his losses and attempt a bloody, likely disastrous retreat. But Caesar's mind works differently. He looks at the impregnable hill and the surrounding army, and he sees a solution so audacious it borders on insanity. He decides to build not one, but 2 massive walls. The first, an inner circumvallation, is a 10-mile-long ring of fortifications facing Alesia, complete with trenches, watchtowers, and brutal hidden traps to prevent any breakout. But then, he orders his men to immediately build a second, outer ring of fortifications, a contravallation facing outwards. Let that sink in. While besieging a city, he simultaneously puts his own army under siege. He creates a fortified donut, with his legions as the filling. For weeks, his men hold the line between these 2 walls. fighting off vicious attacks from both sides simultaneously. They are starving, exhausted, and pushed to the absolute brink of human endurance. The final climactic attack sees Vercingetorix's forces charging down from Alesia, while 250,000 Gauls assault the outer wall. At multiple points, the lines nearly break, but Caesar, positioned at the highest point, directing reserves like a conductor, spots every weakness. At the critical moment, he personally leads his last cavalry reserve out of a hidden gate, smashing into the rear of the Gallic army and shattering their morale completely. It is a victory snatched from the jaws of certain annihilation. This is move number 3 because it is the ultimate expression of Roman discipline and Caesar's unbreakable will. He didn't just win a battle, he broke the spirit of an entire nation by turning their perfect trap into his ultimate triumph. But if Alesia was a defensive masterpiece born of desperation, what does Caesar's genius look like when he is at the peak of his power, orchestrating a campaign of pure, offensive perfection? That is move number 2, a lightning strike so fast it became the standard for operational art for the next 2,000 years. So, if Alesia was a triumph of stubborn, defiant defense, what does the polar opposite look like? A campaign so fluid, so fast, it's less a series of battles and more a strategic chokehold applied with breathtaking speed. This is the Battle of Ilerda, 49 BC. The context is everything. Caesar has just crossed the Rubicon, plunging the Roman world into civil war. His enemies, the Optimates led by Pompey's generals, hold Spain. They have a larger veteran army, a strong defensive position in the fortified town of Ilerda, and control all the supply lines. Their plan is simple. Let Caesar attack them and bleed his army dry against their walls. This is the exact kind of war that destroys armies. So, Caesar refuses to fight it. Instead of a direct assault, he does something that seems nonsensical at first. He camps nearby and he waits. But this isn't inaction. It's a calculated pause. He's waiting for the perfect weapon, the weather. When torrential rains swell the river separating the two armies, washing away the bridges, his enemies rejoice. Caesar is isolated, cut off from his own reinforcements and supplies. This, they believe, is the beginning of his end. But it's exactly what Caesar wanted. The moment the rivers become impassable, the enemy lets their guard down. They believe they have time. And that is when Caesar strikes, not at their walls, but at their perception of reality. Using small, inflatable leather boats, he secretly ferries a small force across the raging river to establish a bridgehead. Then, in a feat of engineering that echoes his Rhine crossing, his legions build a new sturdy bridge in just 2 days, right under the enemy's nose. The Pompeians are stunned. Their primary geographic advantage is gone overnight. But Caesar isn't done. He doesn't cross to attack. He uses his new mobility to outmaneuver them. He seizes the high ground around Ilerda, cutting off their foraging routes and slowly, methodically, encircling them. He fights small, sharp skirmishes, not to destroy them, but to herd them, to demonstrate their helplessness. The final masterstroke is psychological. He allows their cavalry to escape, knowing they will spread panic and despair throughout the entire region. Trapped, surrounded, and with their morale shattered, the Pompeian army surrenders without a final, massive battle. Caesar incorporates their legions into his own and secures all of Spain. This is move number 2, the pinnacle of operational art, because it demonstrates a general so advanced he could win a campaign without a decisive battle. He used rivers as weapons, speed as a strategy, and psychology as his ultimate tool. But all of this, the velocity, the engineering, the encirclements, was a prelude to the single most defining tactical decision of his life. A move that wasn't on a battlefield at all, but on the banks of a small muddy river in Italy. A move that was less about tactics and more about destiny itself. That is our number one. So we arrive at the ultimate move. It involves no intricate fortifications, no hidden legions, and no complex battle lines. Its battlefield was the human heart, and its weapon was an unbreakable will. January 10th, 49th BC. Julius Caesar stands on the north bank of the Rubicon River. This small, shallow stream is the legal boundary of his command. To cross it with a legion is an irrevocable act of treason against the Roman Senate and his rival, Pompey. It means civil war. Behind him stands the battle-hardened 13th Legion, men who would follow him into the underworld. Before him lies Italy and the unknown. Every law, tradition, and voice of reason screams at him to stop, to negotiate, to disband his army. For hours he hesitates, weighing the stakes. To cross is to bet his life, his legacy, and the future of Rome itself on a single throw of the dice. He knows he is outnumbered. He knows he may lose everything. But he also knows that to step back is to accept political annihilation. In that moment of supreme pressure, he makes a choice that echoes through millennia. He chooses audacity. He utters the famous phrase, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, and commands his legion to cross. This is move number one, not for its military brilliance, but for its transcendent understanding of power. The Rubicon was a psychological, legal, and political barrier far more formidable than any wall or army. By crossing it, Caesar demonstrated his core, legendary principle. In moments of existential crisis, the greatest tactic is decisive, irreversible action. He understood that the shockwave of his audacity would paralyze his enemies and create its own reality. He didn't wait for permission or the perfect conditions. He created them. This single act forced the entire conflict into being on his terms. It was the ultimate preemptive strike, a masterstroke that made all his other legendary maneuvers possible. Everything that followed, the conquest of Italy, the campaign in Spain, the triumph at Pharsalus, was a consequence of this one, deliberate, world-shattering step.